Hello and welcome once again to Crazy Comics and Stories. It's me, your charming and delightful old Uncle Rat Bastard. And at the other end of the series of tubes and wires that we call the internets is Joe, Crazy Writer. How you doing today, Joe?
I'm sad. Joe is sad.
Sad music, everybody. Sad music.
Oh, that didn't make me feel better. But we'll talk about it when we get to freaking. We don't want to.
Oh, don't do that.
Oh, we're going to, because you all know there's nothing Cory likes better than a good cliffhanger.
So Joe ordered me,
commanded
to watch the final episode of Star Trek Strange New World, the final episode of the second season, so that we could discuss the entire season today.
Yes. And of course, it ends on a cliffhanger. And as we all know, everybody's on strike. So we won't see the finale until, I don't know. What are we betting? 2025, 26?
Well, the people involved said that without the strike, it would have been a year.
Okay.
With the strike, they've already lost about 4 or 5 months. Then they've got to get everything going again. So they're saying it'll be at least 18 months and most likely 2 years. And the longer the strike goes, the longer that will be.
Yep.
Now, let's also remember, Paramount's a bunch of weasels. Because what happened with Star Trek Prodigy?
Well, they apparently released it in a limited edition Blu-ray DVD that instantly sold out. They don't have it airing anywhere because, as I think we've talked about, one of the things the studios did by bringing everything in the house is they destroyed their $1 billion, licensing fee. You know, when TBS had the rights to do Star Wars until Disney sucked it all into their system, TBS paid money for the rights to do that. So by bringing everything in-house, they destroyed one of their lucrative money streams. And on top of that, DVDs and Blu-rays aren't doing as well as they should be. There's always a few exceptions. Like Kevin Smith has figured out how to make bank, to use his term, because he tours the country with his movie. People go to the auditoriums like me, watch it, listen to the Q&A afterwards, and then we go out and buy the DVDs direct from Lionsgate.
Well, and also on his DVDs, he does what they used to do with DVDs, which is they put on a lot of special features. And one of the things I noticed with DVDs is when they first started coming out, they would put all sorts of special features on them. And then slowly over time, they cut back on the special features and cut back on the special features until I would say by 2010 to 2015, most movies would have your special feature would be the trailer and maybe a 10-minute documentary. Would there be commentary? No.
Well, they pushed it to Blu-ray, trying to get people to buy Blu-ray, but a lot of people didn't want to spend $30 for a Blu-ray that, if they waited till Christmas time, would probably be in a $5 bin somewhere.
But also on Blu-ray, they did the same thing.
Yeah.
Because if you don't pay people to do commentary, that's extra profit. But then, well, if I'm just going to buy and just get the movie, I'll watch it on streaming.
Mm-hmm.
But then, now, as we talked about, as everybody looked at Netflix and went, wow, we could do that. We own all this material. They thought that they would get the huge amounts of money that Netflix gets. But what they found out was...
You ain't Netflix.
Well, they basically took Netflix and then split it into like 6 or 7 different studios. So rather than Netflix buying the rights and giving them royalties, they thought, well, if we bring it all in-house, people will sign up for us and we'll get more money. But they don't, because one, you have to maintain that network. You have to pay for all the streaming. You have all of these expenses. And the only money you get is what people pay every month. And a lot of people have learned that, okay, oh, you're dropping a new season of this show I like. Cool. I'll subscribe, watch it, and then drop it the next month. So they're not getting the same thing as if it's on Netflix and Netflix pays, well, 100,000 people watch, so here's your check. They're not getting that. They thought, well, people will, we've got friends on HBO Max, so everybody will sign up for HBO Max and just keep their subscription. And they don't. They get a subscription. They watch the new stuff that they want to watch, and then they drop until there's a new thing that they want to watch. So what Paramount did, and this is what I'm getting at, hey, we've got this Star Trek Prodigy. It's a co-production between us and our TV network Nickelodeon. And we're almost done with the second season, but screw it. Not only did they pull straw the first season, second season, nearly done, forget it. We're going to finish it and see if we can sell it to somebody.
Yeah.
But Joe, Star Trek Prodigy ended on a cliffhanger.
Well, I wouldn't know. I was only halfway through the first season when they pulled it.
It wasn't like they said see the conclusion.
Yeah, it's not like they said, okay, we're going to pull this. No, they just overnight, boom, gone.
Yeah. And they didn't just pull it. They also, okay, stop production on the second season because until somebody buys it from us, we don't care.
Well, supposedly, the showrunner said they're finishing the second season, strike notwithstanding. So, but we'll see where it goes. What I found interesting, though, is like I said, they rushed out a DVD, Blu-ray, sold out instantly. So it unfortunately rewards their stupid behavior. That and the fact I haven't canceled my Paramount yet. What's funny is, just as a sidebar before we get into the Star Trek, I read somewhere where, you know how they're offering, it's what, like $20 commercial free, $7.99 with commercials.
Yeah.
They're making more money with commercials.
Oh, yeah.
So, again,
because then you're getting the monthly, plus they can charge and they can target those ads.
Oh, yeah. So,
I have Hulu with ads.
Yeah, we still have Hulu without.
And boy, they know me really well. And the other thing about it is, let's say, okay, the strike isn't over until January
2025.
Well, let's just say, January 2024.
25.
Paramount says, you know what?
26.
This streaming thing just isn't working out for us. We're going to go back. We're going to go back to selling our stuff to the other people. We're not going to make anything that's just for streaming anymore. What happens to Star Trek Strange New Worlds?
Maybe you have 2 seasons, 2 episodes a season.
Or we're done.
Yeah.
Or Paramount gets bought by
I heard Gulf Western wants to buy a network. Works so well for the original Star Trek.
Or they do what they did before all of this, where CBS was one entity and Viacom was another entity. And the rights get weirded out. CBS owns the Paramount network. Viacom owns Star Trek. CBS says, we don't want any more Star Trek. It's too expensive. There you go. And that's and you gave me all sorts of shit about the fact that I don't like watching stuff that I know has a cliffhanger.
Oh,
And
whatever.
the reason is, Joe, let's say I take a book I'm reading and I rip it in half, and I give you the first half of the book.
There's a reason I don't. Well, but see, that's not even a good example, because I can go out and find the other book. It's got to be something, Game of Thrones, that like will never be finished. Or if it is finished, it's not finished by the original crew.
Hepcats, All-Star Batman and
Hepcat's
Robin.
There's a better examples.
90% of the series on Netflix.
On the other hand, I also find your attitude.
Let me finish this, please.
Okay.
Before I start watching a show on Netflix now, I will go to the Wikipedia page and see, okay, is it done? If it is, did it end on a cliffhanger? If it did, I'm not going to waste my time watching part of a story. I've read too many parts of stories. I've watched too many parts of stories. I've read too many comics that are parts of stories. It's so annoying. And the first time it pissed me off, the one fantasy series I absolutely loved, Myth Adventures by Robert Asprin. All the books were self-contained. He signed a new deal. And in this new deal, it was a 12-novel deal. And he was going to have 2 different series, one with the 2 main characters and another with all the supporting characters. And he was so happy that he had got this deal, he ended the book on a cliffhanger. Then he got a divorce. He was audited by the IRS. And in the settlement with the IRS, they said, any book you write, we get all the money for until your debt is paid. He did not write another myth novel for nearly a decade. And because he had writer's block because of what happened, did he resolve the cliffhanger? Oh, no. He went back and wrote a story from before those novels. So we waited 12 years for the cliffhanger to be resolved. And that's when I said, I'm no longer reading book series till they're done. With comics, I have boxes of comics where the story is on a cliffhanger and the company went under, the creator lost interest, or it didn't make any money, or on and on and on. And it's not like Marvel where, okay, we ended this on a cliffhanger, we'll finish it up in some other book. Nope, it's just gone. I don't have time for that anymore. I'm 59 years old.
See,
I want a story with a beginning, middle, and end.
That opens up another thing, and I believe our good buddy Nick Post said that. Cory, you've got more video games, DVDs, books, comics than you'll ever read in your lifetime, and you're buying more.
And you know what's great about it? I don't buy them until they have a conclusion.
I find that kind of wimpy, because it's all, even if that is the last time we ever see Strange New Worlds, that's the last you're going to get. I mean, I would never stop watching something if I knew it's heading to a cliffhanger. Even Game of Thrones on HBO, I mean, I might not watch it because people said the 7th season sucked, when they tried to go on their own. But I just, again, it's your choice. I just find it kind of odd.
It's with episode 9.
Because originally you came at me with, I won't remember what it is when it finally
which is also again. True.
And I'm like, wow, I wish I had that type of problem. I remember every episode. Like, I haven't finished Lucifer. It was on Fox and on Netflix, and they finished it. But my wife and I have never finished that particular season, the final season. I remember the cliffhanger very well. I guess it's, to me, I like Star Trek enough where I'll watch it. And even if it never is resolved, which I'd find hard to believe, I'm fine. I can wait 2 years. I'm still waiting for Miss Mystic to finish. I waited.
Good luck with that.
I waited
Everyone
a
involved
year.
is dead.
I waited a year. Yeah, it'll be cheaper. I waited a year for Camelot 3000. I waited for Dark Knight. You know, because of the Civil War, I closed my comic shop. It's like, yeah, but again, it's not something I can argue with. It's just not anything I agree with. That said, how do you want to do this? I've got the Wikipedia up. Should we just start with episode 1 and go forward?
Sure, let's start with episode 1, which
season 2.
Yep.
We're not going to do the whole thing. Strange New Worlds, if you care, follows Captain Christopher Pike and the crew of the Starship Enterprise in the 23rd century, depending on who's complaining, either 2 years or 10 years before Kirk takes over. The thing to remember about this, and again, this is heavy spoiler, so if you haven't watched it or you're saying, yeah, I'm going to watch this, you probably want to skip this and go right to Freaking and Geeking. Well, maybe for our ads first. The thing to remember is this takes place after The Cage. The Cage being the original pilot that we saw initially in the 2-part menagerie where Christopher Pike was exposed to some radiation, saving cadets, and he's bound in a wheelchair and can just beep. 1 for yes, 2 for no. Again, I don't want to nitpick, but you're considering all the different transportation, weird stuff they've done, making clone bodies and different bodies and shit like that. Why does he have to sit in a wheelchair? Whatever. Pike, I believe it was during Discovery, because I didn't watch Discovery before I started Strange Worlds. He discovered that he knows what his future is. He knows this is what's going to happen. He is somewhat,
he came to terms with it during the first season.
Yeah. So, and again, the first season, last episode, which you can watch, which was a brilliant episode. So at the end of season 1, his number 1 first lieutenant, I'm trying to think of her name.
Number 1?
That's what they called her, but they actually gave her a name. Una Chinriley. So,
which she did not have a name in the original series.
Yeah, that's the other thing that drives me crazy when people, this isn't Pike, this isn't the way it was. Dude, we got 1 pilot episode that Roddenberry cut into 2 to make the menagerie. And please, it's like people complaining about Boba Fett. He had 16 minutes of time in the original Star Wars. We can do whatever the F we want with him. Well, in this case, I like Anson Mount's Christopher Pike. Ethan Peck plays Spock, doing a great job of it. Christine Chapel is there. That's another contention to canon people, because Christine Chapel was always pining after Spock, but they're like, she didn't know Spock. We didn't know she didn't know Spock. Let's see who else we got. We got Kristen Chong playing Leon Noonien Singh. Yes. Khan! Celia Rose Gooding is playing Nyota. I'm terrible with names. Nyota or Hura. Again, she never had a first name in the show. It was given to her in a book, and they adapted it that way. Melissa Nieva is Eric Ortega as the first officer. Joseph Mbenga is played by Babs. I'm sorry, Babs. I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name. But again, this is a guy who we see, I believe, 2 times in the original series. And then we mentioned earlier Rebecca Ramin playing number 1. So at the end of the first season, number 1 is arrested because she is an enhanced being. Star Trek. Go ahead.
She is genetically modified. And as we remember from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, that is illegal in the Federation due to the eugenics wars.
Yep. So the last thing we see is she's arrested, taken off. The first episode starts. Captain Pike takes off. And again, behind the scenes thing, which is why people were complaining, well, there wasn't a lot of Pike. Well, Anson Mount and his wife had a child. And so he got to spend time with their new child. So a lot of times when it was like, why isn't Pike in this show? You're kind of like, well, why not? It's not like the original Star Trek, which was essentially a three-person show. Since Next Generation, it's been an ensemble show. So he takes off. In the meantime, the Enterprise receives a distress call from Security Officer Noonien Singh, who's on a mining planet. Spock disobeys an order from Robert April. Again, Robert April is played by Adrian Holmes. And for you canon people, they haven't explained how he becomes a white guy in the animated series. But we're not going there. I'm going to needle you bastards, so just get used to it. Spock steals the Enterprise with the help of a new character played by Carol Kane, Pelia. And the funny thing is, Carol Kane plays it with an accent, so I have a real tough time hearing her. Sometimes I've actually got to put the words on. So, anyways, they figure out how to steal it. They go find Leanne on the planet. She explains that an ex-cabal of ex-Starfleet and Klingon soldiers are planning to restart the recently ended Klingon Federation War. M'Benga and Chapel are captured, taken to a ship that's been coupled together from Starfleet technology. They want to make it look like a Starfleet ship attacks a Klingon outpost. What ends up happening is M'Benga and Chapel fight their way off the false flag ship as Spock orders its destruction, saving the arriving Klingons. And Spock bonds with the Klingon captain over blood wine, who impresses everybody. When Spock returns the ship, he gets reprimanded, but they're privately grateful that Spock prevented a Klingon war because they're having problems with the Gorn. The Gorn, as you remember, being a rubber spacesuit thing that Kirk fought, are scary as hell. They are like aliens run amok, which is the best way to describe it.
They're basically evil lizard men.
If you get captured by the Gorn, you're tossed into their breeding pits. All it takes is for them to get a little spit or blood or whatever on it, and that thing's growing inside you, and you'll die. The first episode for me was a good setup. I think they did a great job by not jumping into the cliffhanger from last season. And it was, Spock steals a ship. Yeah, they kind of remastered that from when Kirk steals a ship. But to me, I guess I don't complain with the new stuff. I just enjoy the hell out of it. One thing I always recommend doing after watching any new Star Trek is go over to trekculture.com on YouTube. Look for Ups and Down, because Sean Fennick does a good job of going up and down what he likes, what he doesn't like. And he also goes to what they call Cetacean Observation, where they cover all the Easter eggs. I'm not even going to bother trying because they're just so great. Now, did you watch this?
Yes.
With the cliffhanger knowing from last season, or was it one of those, oh, come on?
I did not know there was going to be a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And I remember I complained at the time. First off, cliffhanger. Second, the exact same cliffhanger they had used on Star Trek Lower Decks.
Yeah.
We're 2 minutes from the end of the episode, Starfleet shows up and arrests the captain. The cliffhanger was very much, had nothing to do with the episode that was going on. It was, okay, everything's done, and then, hey, we're here to arrest number one.
Yeah.
And it felt very much like, why did you tack this on? I hate the season-ending cliffhanger. I've hated it for years, especially like in this episode, like in the episode before, where it's just, I guess we got to have one. Rather than we're building up to something. It wasn't. It was all right, we got you hooked.
There was a good point from
this episode.
I believe Sean said from Ups and Downs on Trek Culture. He says he thinks that the showrunners don't talk with each other in terms of what's going on, because you think someone would have said, this is a lot like what you guys did in in Ups and or Lower Decks. Same thing. Did you watch Prodigy or Picard?
I watched Prodigy, yes.
Okay.
Picard,
Remember?
I watched the first episode of the 3rd season.
Yeah.
And have not had time for the rest.
Okay. Put your fingers in your ear, because this is a major, major spoiler. Assuming he's got his fingers in his ears. They use the same thing in Prodigy. Something takes over the entire fleet that they do in Picard. And it's like, yeah, there's chance that people would go like, yeah, well, it didn't work here. We'll try it here. More likely, they didn't talk to each other to figure out, hey, we're using the almost exact same plot. So, again, major spoiler. Hopefully, Cory, are you back?
Yes.
Okay. So, didn't want to give too much away.
There were things I liked about this episode, but major problems I had with it. And the major problem I had with it was Spock steals the ship. And when he comes back, Starfleet's like, oh, you bad boy. And then, we get we're going to need everyone possible because the Gorn are coming. When they stole the ship in Star Trek 3, they had to save the Earth not to be court-martialed.
Well, they still got court-martialed. They just, all the charges were dismissed, except when they demoted Kirk.
Right. So you would think they would do something other than, oh, Spock, you're a naughty boy. Naughty, naughty boy. Shouldn't have done that.
Even when Worf disobeyed Picard and went after Duras and killed him, the Klingons were like, yeah, we're fine. That's the way it works. Picard put an official reprimand in Worf's record.
Yes.
Which, yeah, again, part of the big complaints we have now is, yeah, they've got 10 episodes. What are they going to deal with? What are they just going to push off? If they had 24 episodes, like normal, they could probably do that. Or again, one of the big complaints, Melissa Nieves Ortega or Erica Ortegas didn't get her episode to shine. Again, part of it was because Melissa's partner, Brianna Bannon, died 3 days in 2021, 3 days after being diagnosed with leukemia. So they're thinking maybe that's why they didn't want to do a heavily featured episode with her, because she was going through shit. But be that as it may, this also going to be in play why we have Chapel, why we have Uhura, why we have M'Benga, because these are people that we know, and you don't have to spend a lot of time introducing them. And plus you can flesh out their character and things like that.
Now,
no, go ahead.
If this was something where it started in one episode and took to a couple episodes, I could almost get okay, we've written ourselves into a corner, what do we do? But this was all in one episode.
Yeah. And yeah, it was funny watching Spock go across the bridge knowing he has a hangover from all the blood wine.
Right. But they wrote themselves into a corner and then hand waved their way out of it on the same episode. That's just lazy writing. And I expect more from a series that costs this much.
That's very much in like the first season of Next Gen. They did that where it's like, okay, we got 10 minutes to finish this. 3 different storylines. How are they going to do it?
Of course, or at the end of the season where we've got this huge threat. Oh, look, there's the main bad guy. Kill it with a phaser and everything's better. Hooray! This was very much a poorly written episode. There were good bits to it, but it needed somebody to sit down and iron stuff out better. The second episode made up for it.
Yeah, ad astra per aspera, which I forget what that means, but this is the trial of number 1. The prosecution's led by Pike's girlfriend, Captain Maria Bartel. She builds a case against number 1. She violated Starfleet's anti-genetic modification laws by hiding her identity as a genetically modified, how did they say it? Iranian?
Yeah,
Iranian.
Irelian.
Thank you. Well, Pike, meantime, went to get a civil rights attorney to counsel number one, Nira Ketol. And number one and Nira have history together. So it takes a while for Pike to convince her to come. And they do, the trial goes on. I don't want to spend too much time talking about it. Leon worries that somebody took the information from her personal logs because she was very upset when she found out that number one was anti-genetic modification, or she was genetically modified, because obviously being a Noonien Singh, she's kind of bristles at that. Number one testifies about the opposition and the marginalization that her race faced, even being part of the Federation, part of Starfleet. She joined Starfleet because she believed it celebrated diversity. She is eventually Nira. I don't want to. Nira discovers a loophole that the judge accepts and acquits number one, so they're back. What I found interesting in this episode was, Pike, of course, wants to run into the rescue. He wants to talk to it, and right away, somebody asks him, "Okay, let's do a mock. When did you know that she was modified?" I believe it was his girlfriend saying that. Okay, right away, you are now under trial because you didn't report it the minute you found out. You blew it off. And that actually does come up in the trial as one of the wily old prosecuting Vulcan, who apparently also has history with Spock. There's a scene in the beginning where they're both sitting at a table with each other, and I believe Chapel and Mbinga are talking about, oh, look at those two. They're probably just mad at each other. No, they're just having a logical conversation. Spock gets up as the other guy leaves and comes over. I'm sorry you had to witness that display. So there's history there, which is fun. Everybody got to wear their dress uniforms, which was neat. They got the little bell, bing, from court martial way back from the original series. A wonderful episode because they not only showed Pike why you can't say anything. I was curious how they were going to get out of it, because we knew Starfleet wasn't going to see the light and go, oh, yes, you're absolutely right. You've proven that we can allow it, because we all know the ban goes into the 24th century. And again, it's just Starfleet's ban. It's not anybody else's ban. And it's just a great trial episode. And like Cory said, made up for kind of the goofiness of the first episode, which again, I enjoyed. And then again, if you want to just skip the first episode, go into the second, I don't blame you, because I watched it week to week as it came out. What did you think on this one, Cory?
I thought this was the best episode of the season, and maybe the best episode of the new era of Star Trek. It was about philosophy. It underlined the choices characters have made leading up to this. It also kind of underlined Starfleet, but the best part was Christopher Pike didn't barrel in like Kirk. No, he outthought people by making sure that the defense attorney that he chose was someone who could figure out a way through because of their own past and their own, basically, he chose the defense attorney who could figure this out, and not just figure this out, but also affect change in Starfleet. This was very much a thinking person's episode, which is why I watched Star Trek. It was philosophy and about modern age ideas, but if you put them in the future, we have that little bit of distance from them. So if you did a story like this about genetics and things like that set in the modern era, it would be very political. But because you put it in Star Trek and you cloak it in lasers and alien races and stuff, it goes down easier. Which
Cory,
is what the original Star Trek did. They would take modern social issues, put phasers and rubber suits around it so that people would go, oh, cool, this is a great action show.
Cory, what's the number one thing you know about all the stories that I'm a sucker for?
Time travel.
Oh, man. Episode 3. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. Again, it's time travel. And everybody complains, oh, Star Trek goes to time travel. But I absolutely loved it. A wounded man appears on the Enterprise right in front of Leanne, gives her a time traveling device. As she wanders through, she goes onto the bridge and finds out it's Captain by James T. Kirk. Quick sidebar. What do you think of the actor that plays Kirk?
I like him.
I do too.
Like him. I also like that he underplays it.
Yeah.
He has Shatner's mannerisms, but he doesn't do like other people do when they are playing someone. Basically, a lot of people, when they take the part of that another actor has had, they will sort of exaggerate that actor's quirks. He underplays it because the Kirk we know is an actor who is a 60s action star. That would not work in today's environment. Acting is much different. So you get that same feel of Kirk without the over-emoting that you had to do in 60s TV.
Now, of course, Kirk accidentally ends up back in time with Leanne to the 2020s Toronto, which was great because they're filming in Toronto. They form a romantic bond. They search for the point of divergent that caused the alternative timeline, and they discover a eugenics lab where a very young Khan Noonien Singh is being raised. A Romulan time traveler named Sarah intends to change human history by killing Khan and preventing the eugenic wars, which would keep humanity from the path that eventually led to unity and the Federation. Great idea, but she's been doing it for 30 years, and every time she does something, well, all it does is push things backwards. In the original series, whatever, Spock mentions that the eugenic wars happened in 1990. Well, here we are, 2023. It hasn't happened yet. And Sarah makes a comment about that she keeps pushing it back. Sarah kills Kirk, fights Luan, who kills Sarah and saves Khan. She's returned to the Enterprise and is thanked by a time-traveling investigator from the future, colleague of the mysterious man who confiscates the time travel device, swears Leanne to secrecy. She contacts her timeline's Kirk. He has no memory of her. She is beside herself, but she has a 20th century watch that she locks away that they had used to find the eugenics lab. Again, I'm a sucker for a time travel story, and what I thought was a brilliant workaround to what we thought we knew about the eugenic war. It's there. Again, this ties into so many different things. That the temporal Cold War, or it doesn't, we don't know. The temporal Cold War from Enterprise, the fact in Discovery it went hot, the time travel wibbly wobbly timely wimey, and I'm getting to that in a minute, that we saw in Voyager. I love a good time travel episode. Yes, they go to the well quite a bit. I think a time travel agent could do a wonderful story, just all the different times in the past that somebody's gone back in time to go forward to change history. They visited in Picard, they visited it in Deep Space Nine Tribble episode. But I can't get enough of it. I thought this was very interesting. I thought it left a lot of questions open. There was such a controversy, though. People online, I swear, there's people online that are so diehard next gen or original series that if anything diverges from it, oh, this is a turn timeline, Star Trek's ruined, I don't like it, whatever. We've talked about that type of attitude before. I spent so many times just saying, guys, I read DC comic books. They have reset their universe no less than 5 times since 1977. And every time somebody comes up with a new reason to change it, I just go with it. I'm also a big Doctor Who fan. Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey. Yeah, somebody's messing around with it, but the eugenic wars is a fixed point. It always goes back to where it was. So for me, this was a brilliant way of saying, yeah, things may not match up to what we're doing, but you can enjoy the story. And of course, my brain went to sleep that night coming up with a lot of time travel Star Trek stories. What was your take on this one?
I thought this was, one, a great way to save money.
Oh, yeah, going to Toronto, too.
One of the things that TV series will do, and I don't know, Joe, if you know this term, they will do what they call bottle episodes.
Oh,
and that is
some of my favorite bottle episodes on the original series just took place in the ship.
Yeah, and it's you just use the characters on the show, and you just use the sets you already have. The most famous one is on Breaking Bad. They had spent all this money on the new set for the meth lab. So they just had the 2 lead characters dealing with a fly that had gotten into the lab. And everybody involved said, we needed to have a cheap episode so that we could stretch our budget for other things. This was very much a cheap episode. I like because it's a creative challenge. All right, we need to do a story that saves us money. Okay, we'll do a movie or a TV show or whatever set in the modern day. One of the reasons Star Trek 4 happened was because they went, okay, your budget is this much. And they looked over the budget and they went, wow, it's the same budget we had for 2 and 3, but everybody's salary went up. The cost of special effects have gone up. What can we do using the same money? And it's, well, we don't have to build a lot of sets and do a lot of stuff if we just set it in modern day. Cool. Here's a story for modern day. I don't mind time travel stories because it's science fiction. That would be like, I don't like them stories about aliens in my science fiction show. Yes, aliens probably, one of the things when you start studying outer space is it is so big. We will probably never encounter another civilization in my lifetime, my son's lifetime, my great grandson's lifetime, etc. Because it's everything is so far away.
To inject reality, they pointed the Hubble Space Telescope at a place where they thought there was nothing. They found 100,000 galaxies.
Yeah.
We're talking galaxies, things the size of our galaxy. There's 2 things that terrify me. First of all, the thought that we may not be alone in the universe. And second, we may be alone in the universe because it's huge. What did they say in Hitchhiker's Guide? It's big, mind-boggling big, tremendously big. And of course, the encyclopedia bogs down after a while because it goes on like this for a while.
And if you really want to creep yourself out, okay, Joe, let's say we put you in a spaceship that goes 0.999999999 times the speed of light.
Oh yeah, I'll get to sit if we got a live feed. I'll watch you basically age and die before my eyes before I barely get a chance to register.
Oh, that's not the scary part. And you just take off, and you go for 200,000 years outside the ship. Well, because the universe is expanding at such a fast rate, if you were to turn around and come back and try to come back after doing that, you would never make it.
Oh.
Because everything is expanded so far and is going away from things are expanding away from Earth faster than the speed of light because actual space is expanding faster than the speed of light. How's that for horrifying?
Well, I thought you were going to say, like, if the sun were to go nova, we would learn about it 8 minutes later when everything went super bright and be dead a few hours later. Among the locust eaters is number 4. Pike pisses off his girlfriend.
This was classic Star Trek.
Yeah. The Enterprise goes back to Rigel 7, which was the site of an earlier unsuccessful mission. Think the cage. We see bits of it, but we've never seen the actual. So what happens is there's asteroids surrounding the planet, make people forget who they are. Pike, Leanne, and Minga discover Zach Wing, a yeoman who Pike thought was dead, but isn't. He's become a despotic ruler, enforces a caste system where laborers lose their memories every night, but he and his guards do not. So he tosses the crew out. They start losing their memories. They become laborers. They hear a legend that their memories are stored inside the castle. Pike fights his way inside, beats the living shit out of Zach because he doesn't know who he is, and learns that the castle itself blocks the radiation. On the ship, the crew of the Enterprise loses their memories, but the pilot, Erica, remembers what to do from the ship's computer and is able to get back to the bridge and navigate their ship away from the asteroids. So the away team recovers their memories. They return to the Enterprise. Pike has the main asteroid pull out of orbit, ridding Rigel 7 of the radiation and restoring the laborers' memories. Apologizes to his girlfriend. They resume their relationship. So again, I'm simplifying the episode, but it's a brilliantly written episode. One where when I was watching, I was genuinely like, I have no clue how they're getting out of this one. They might be truly screwed. What were you thinking, Cory? I know you've already said you liked the episode.
It felt very much like an original series episode. We have a scientific problem. We have a ticking clock. And we have a scientific solution. This is, if you would have told me that this was a script from 1968 that they had dug up out of a file somewhere and just did some polishing on it, I would have agreed. This was very much old school Star Trek. I enjoyed it a lot because of that. I always like Star Trek when it's a science puzzle.
On episode 5, we find out what Spock would be like if he was human. Because Spock and Chapel are nearly killed. They encounter a portal created by a higher dimensional race who heals Chapel, but reconfigures Spock, seeing he's half human, half Vulcan, into a human. Unfortunately, this happens as Spock's prepping for an engagement with his fiancée, T'Pring, and her bigoted parents, well, the mom more, T'Pril, and I think it was Sivek. Spock human mother, Amanda, played by a very pumped up Mia Kushner, shows up to help Spock prepare. Spock doesn't tell T'Pring of his condition, hoping not to worry her. The crew helps disguise him and try to stall the ritual until a cure is found. Meanwhile, Chapel goes back to the higher dimensional race to try to convince them to return Spock to normal, and she has to confess her feelings to them in order to convince them. What's funny is her crewmates that are with her are Uhura and Leanne. No, not Leanne. No, it was Leanne, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, they were there, and they're both like, they knew Chapel had a serious thing going for Spock, and once she had to admit it, they give her something that allows her to return it. Spock, of course, passes everything with flying color. The Ma says something bigoted, like, if only you weren't half human. He pulls off his ears and says, I am fully human and I passed it. T'Pring is offended that Spock hid his condition from her, asks to take a break from their relationship. And of course, Chapel comes to explain, and Spock says, I have feelings for you, and they kiss. Hey now. So My favorite part of this episode was T'Pring's father, who was genuinely interested in everything going on. Pike cooked a traditional Vulcan meal, and he's like, "Oh, really?" And T'Pring's mother is like, "Well, it won't be any good." Yes, I suppose it won't be any good. He is typically a henpecked Vulcan husband.
I loved him
yes.
so much. I want him on every episode.
I want to just see him and T'Pring together without the mom. So, yeah, it was a fun episode. It forwarded the Spock Chapel thing. Knowing that they actually now are having a relationship, it kind of you go to watch the Next Generation. I'm sorry, the original series, and it kind of intensifies when Michelle Barrett's playing Chapel, especially pining for Spock. I think of the episode when they went down to the planet and Spock and Chapel were forced to kiss. Of course, Kirk got to kiss Uhura, but that's a different subject. And she was so embarrassed, and it's like, well, yeah, you're being forced now to make out with your ex-lover. Anyways, it was a good episode. It furthered some of the stiffiness of the Vulcans. Next episode, Lost in Translation.
Well, hold on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
What I liked best about it, if you would have told me going into this season that our number one comedy character was going to be Spock, I would not have believed you. Most of the comedy from this season comes from Spock.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's trying to embrace his human side.
And also, it ties in with what we saw in the cage. We saw a Spock who smiles and laughs and all that. So it sort of bridges that. But this was very much an old school farce. And one of the things that I liked about this season was each episode felt like a separate entity. You had your caper, you had your legal drama, you had your old school Star Trek episode, you had your time travel. This was a classic farce. You could have taken this script, taken out all the Star Trek stuff, and it would have worked with Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy in the 30s. And that's a compliment. It played off those old school tropes, and it showed the creativity of also their willingness to take risks. You've only got 10 episodes a season. If you're going to take risks, you better. It's one of those where if you're going to take risks, you better take them, and you better do it fast.
And we haven't even gotten to the riskiest ones that really divided fanfare. Lost in Translation was not one of them. The Enterprise, joined by the USS Farragut, who's got Kirk on it. Uhura begins experiencing hallucinations of strange noises and frightening images that nobody else has. This includes the death of her parents, which we were aware of from the first season. The images of the former engineer Hemmer, who died from a Gorn last season. Pelia discovers the refinery's been sabotaged by another Starfleet officer. The officer is taken to sickbay. He exhibits symptoms similar to Uhura. As Ramon escapes the sickbay, he attempts to sabotage the Enterprise. Uhura pursues him, is unable to calm him down, and Kirk, who I'll get to Kirk in a second, he's able to rescue her before Ramon is blown into space by an explosion he set. Kirk discusses the hallucinations with Kirk. He helps her realize she needs to confront her grief about her parents, about Hemmer, rather than ignore it. With the help of Kirk and his brother Sam, who's a xenoanthropologist, Uhura realizes that her hallucinations are messages from aliens who live in the deuterium that's being mined and being sucked into the Enterprise as fuel. She reports her theory to Pike. He orders the refinery destroyed. Uhura later introduces Kirk to Spock. Number of wonderful things in this. First of all, this is the first time, other than the little camera thing, we see the real Kirk, the other one being an alternative timeline Kirk. Kirk, it's funny because when he talks to the different women on the Enterprise, they all kind of shoot him down like he's hitting on them. And that's not the case with Uhura. He's genuinely worried about her. Well, and there's even a scene where when Uhura is hallucinating, she smacks what she thinks is an evil version of her, only to find out, oh, you just punched Kirk in the nose. And Kirk, instead of reporting it, he's like, hey, we need to figure out what's going on here. Kirk actually shows quite a bit of empathy in this episode, especially when helping Uhura. I love the fact that Pike, once Uhura reports the theory to Pike, he believes her and takes action. It's reminiscent of one of my favorite Picard moments when Barclay wakes up the bridge crew in the middle of the night and he says, I think I know there is something in the transporter and we have to figure out what it is. And Picard listens to him and orders, let's do it. To have that type of faith, and considering Barclay was a screw up, I like that. The only negative I have on this episode, and it's probably because I've watched a lot of science fiction, a lot of Star Trek, I knew exactly what the F was going on. Why? Hey, we're having problems here. Could something be living in this nebula? It's happened before, or maybe it hasn't happened to Starfleet. I don't know. There's a lot of different things going on. So to me, it was, okay, let's get to the point where the crew takes care of it. I had no idea Pike was going to destroy the refinery, but it was a good episode. Again, kind of, for me, not the best, because it was like, okay, if she's hallucinating and she's a communication officer, somebody in the nebula is trying to get a hold of you, sweetheart. And nobody thought of that until it was, till Sam come down and figured it out. Your thoughts, Cory?
I like this episode because it was focused on Uhura. Uhura is a character who's been around Star Trek for a long time, and we know next to nothing about her. Nichelle Nichols, while she was a great actress, did a great job on Star Trek, we don't know anything about Uhura from the TV series. They never mentioned her family. They never mentioned her doubts about Starfleet. She was just hailing frequencies open captain and the pretty girl.
Although I will put a note in there. There's an episode in the animated series when the male crew members are succumbed by a female race who put the male, they basically suck the energy out to keep them alive. Uhura assumes command and essentially tells this race, if you don't return the men, I'm blowing this planet up. And I thought, I would have loved to have seen that as a live episode. So she had her moment, just not the way it should have been. Right. But yeah, Cory's right. A lot of these characters are blank slates. We don't know a lot about them. Let's fill it in. Did you get a little tingle when Kirk and Spock met?
Not really.
Oh, I did.
It's one of those where it's, oh, cool, that was fun.
Yeah. And it was at the end it was kind of like a capper at the end of the episode. It wasn't like a big deal. It wasn't like we got to meet. No, Kirk, this is Spock. Spock, this is Kirk. So, and of course, they're doing more with Sam, who we know nothing about, because when we first met him, he was dead from some space amoeba, I guess.
Space pancakes.
Yeah. Oh, I would hit Spock right on the ass if I recall the outtakes. Can we get to the next one? You got anything to say about this one? I want to get to the next one.
Yeah.
Oh, I grinned for a solid hour. Those old scientists, TOS. My first cheer was Jonathan Frakes directed it. Oh my God. Cory, do you watch Lower Deck?
Oh yeah.
I don't think this episode would mean as much if you hadn't watched Lower Decks. Same thing in Deep Space Nine. If you've never seen Trouble with Tribbles, the Deep Space Nine episode, Tribulation, whatever, wouldn't mean as much to you. So again, if I can understand why some people didn't like it. People didn't like it because it was animated in parts. Essentially, two of the characters, and we knew about this from last season. Everybody was dying for this episode to get here. two of the characters from Lower Deck are investigating an ancient portal. They're animated. They accidentally, Boimler, he accidentally activates it, gets thrown out of the portal as a live action person, lands at the feet and looks up at Spock and goes, "You all look so real," and collapses. The best part about it is
Brad Boimler.
Thank
Just
you.
click on his name.
Jack Quaid he does the voice of Boimler. He does the live action, which is brilliant. And he gets it to a T. There are scenes in Strange New Deck where he's like, "Ah!" And he does that when him and Spock accidentally blow up something. I could go on and on about this episode. I don't want to do too much. I thought it was a brilliant episode that combined the two really well. And then, of course, the best part is when Mariner, played by Tawny Newsome, comes through to try to save Boimler and ends up kind of screwing things up a little bit more. And again, she plays it great. There's in jokes like when Boimler goes to Mariner, "You notice how they talk so slow here?" Because in Lower Decks, it's animated. They talk at a frenzy pace. And the other two, forget who it was it Spock to somebody said, oh, number one said it. She said, "You notice how they talk so fast?" Again, a lot of in jokes there. The best joke. And of course, it's highlighted by the fact that Jonathan Frakes was mere feet away from it. Boimler's alone in a deck while the crew tries to figure out what they're going to do with these, because they realize he's from the future. They have to figure out how to get him back. He's in there and he sees a saddle, pike saddle, and he's like, "Oh, dare I do it?" And he swings his leg up and over and goes, "Riker," boom, and lands it. While Jonathan Frakes is mere feet from him. A total improv line by Jack Quaid. And what's even better is Frakes talks that when his wife saw that, she laughed so hard. Riker. There were other improvs, things like that, but to me, this episode was just a blast. It ends up, no big deal. They send the two time travel people back to their own time, and they end the episode. First of all, they open the credits in an animated style, which was brilliant, and then they end it where the Enterprise crew are drinking something that Mariner left behind, and they're turning into animated characters, and they're like, "This doesn't feel right." To me, this was a nonstop. It's not my favorite episode, but this is one I will watch over and over and over. I mentioned Upper Decks or Up and Down from Star Trek Culture, where he goes into details. But there's also a show called The Ready Room, which is on Paramount's YouTube channel, where Will Wheaton does a kind of a recap, a behind the scenes of the episode, and then has the guests on the show. And on that particular show, he had Tawny Newsome, Jack Quaid, and Jonathan Frakes. And they talked about doing the episode, putting it together. I'm going to stop gushing, Cory. I need to hear your take on this one.
This was very much fan service, and I don't mind fan service. I think fan service, when it is done well, can result in some of people's favorite shows. If you ask people who aren't huge Star Trek fans what their favorite episode was of the original series, they're all going to say The Trouble with Tribbles.
Yes.
Which was flat out comedy. It's the same with this. This was, first off, comedy is much harder to write than drama. Drama is, as somebody who has written both, oh my God, I would so much rather write drama or horror because it's so much easier than comedy. Comedy is hard, and they nailed it. One of the things that I've talked about is that Anson Mount, even when he's not the focus, is doing stuff in the background to add to every scene he's in. And it's really clear if he doesn't get a nomination for an Emmy, that means that people are paying attention. He is so good at that
absolutely.
sort of thing. And he's almost each captain on Star Trek has been very different. He is very much the warm, nurturing leader that this sort of show needs, because it is, it's very much a nostalgia show. It's wrapping itself in old Star Trek. So you want a captain who's going to wrap that same feeling, but he's also doing stuff in the background that build his character. He was so good at his comedic timing in this, reacting to things, not overplaying it, not overwhelming everybody involved. This is one of those episodes, if they ever run this on regular TV, which if the strike goes on much longer, you're going to see more and more streaming shows show up on network TV, by the way.
Didn't they say, was it Sopranos or Breaking Bad's going to go to regular TV? Which baffled me, because I'm like, boy, you're going to have a lot of bleeps to bleep out.
Well, Breaking Bad was a TV show.
I mean,
Sopranos was on
yeah,
Sopranos was on AMC. Sopranos, I don't know which one. I do know that the first 2 episodes of Strange New Worlds are going to be put on CBS. And let's be honest, when they do something like that, if it does well, they're going to run the rest.
Oh, yeah.
So I really liked this episode. And the pacing of this season got really weird for me. And we talked about it a little last week, where you had comedy episode, the darkest Star Trek episode, I think, ever, and then a musical.
Yeah.
So it was boom, boom, boom. It was very much a whiplash effect. So the next episode, Joe?
Under the Cloak of War. So the Enterprise hosts Ambassador Dakra, a Klingon general who defected to the Federation and is said to have killed his own officers when he learned that they had ordered attack on civilians while fighting on the moon of Jakal. Veterans of the Federation Klingon War, including Ortegas, M'Benga, and Chapel, are uncomfortable with his presence. M'Benga and Chapel served at a field hospital on Jakal, think MASH, and witnessed the brutality of the Klingon forces under Dakra's command. Well, Dakra invites M'Benga to join his campaign for peace, citing the symbolic power of a partnership between the two men who are on opposing sides, and offers to help M'Benga find healing from the trauma experiences. M'Benga rejects his offer and reveals that he knows it was Dakra who ordered the attacks on the civilians. It was M'Benga, hyped up on a chemical that we saw used in the previous episode that Chapel and M'Benga took, that basically made him a killing machine. M'Benga was the one who killed the Klingon officers whose deaths Dakra is taking credit for. M'Benga is the, how did they call it? The killer of Jakal.
Yes.
Not the general.
The
butcher. It ends out where M'Benga, well, they say M'Benga kills Dirac with the same dagger in which he killed his officers. The fight took place behind a screen. We don't know if Dakra was, overzealous with M'Benga. M'Benga was defending himself. Did M'Benga kill him? Very vague. People are very, no, he did this, he did that. Chapel came in. I thought Chapel witnessed it, but they're saying Chapel saw what we saw. 2 figures struggling behind a weird partition, kind of semi-clear partition. M'Benga tells Pike that he did not intend to kill Dakra, but does not regret it. Again, Pike makes a comment, there will be an inquiry, but I don't see any problem. So again, the problem we had with the one episode where, okay, Spock's not just kind of bad Spock, go ahead. This will occur off camera, but my gosh, this was a very dark, very gruesome. Think MASH times 20. I would have nightmares listening, because what they do, you know, the big thing on MASH is incoming choppers, and you know what's coming. In this, it was, they had a transporter hub, incoming transport. In the female's voice, I would have nightmares hearing that voice ever. In real life, people who watch this episode, I think you fall into two categories. You've either been in a war and you understand Ortega's, Mbinga, Chapel, or you're like Pike, Uhura, and everybody else who have not been in a war. Because people that I know that have fought in the Gulf Wars, they understand what Mbinga and Chapel go through. I don't. I think more like Kirk, I said Kirk again, Pike, and number one, and Uhura. Yes, Dakara makes sense. I couldn't understand why Mbinga couldn't say, yes, I understand it. He's still suffering from the trauma he experienced. I have no effing clue what that's like. I have friends who do in real life. Again, such a flip from last episode where I was constantly smiling and laughing to this episode where I was like, the only thing I've ever seen close to this is there's a Deep Space Nine episode during the Dominion War where the crew gets trapped on the surface and they are fighting eventually hand-to-hand combat with the Jem'Hadar. And that was lauded as a very dark episode showing, we have a war, we shoot a couple phasers, ships blow up. No, it's more to that than this. And again, I didn't rewatch this episode. I will eventually, but there was so much going on in this, and it makes you wonder. That's all I'm going to say. Cory, what's your reaction on this?
Joe, did you ever watch the rebooted Battlestar Galactica?
To be blunt, I couldn't. I made the mistake of trying to binge it. It is depressing as hell.
Okay. Did you make it to the episode called 46 Minutes?
I don't believe so.
That's
I've probably
where
seen
the
it.
Galactica has to jump every 46 minutes because it takes 46 minutes for the Cylons to find them.
Oh, wow. No, I have probably seen bits of it on YouTube because I've seen like all the major engagements, but I don't recall seeing that episode.
It felt a lot like this, where it was not about war as a battle or war as an action. It was about war as trauma. And the thing that I liked the most about it was you had this Klingon who had this huge change of heart and was a hippie Klingon, for lack of a better term. But the people who'd been at war, who'd been in the heart of it, were so damaged by what happened, they could not get past it. And as I said earlier, this is the darkest Star Trek episode ever. But again, it takes modern social issues and puts them in a science fiction setting so that they're more relatable. So that there's enough distance that you can be dispassionate. Because think of all of the people now who have dealt with terrorists or war or other traumatic things, and all you have is anger and wanting revenge, and yet the other person has gone through it differently and come out a different person. The people who are still dealing with that trauma can't deal with it. This was telling that story and telling the horror of that story, and how the hippie Klingon to me was the most fascinating character of all, because it was very much he had gone through all of this stuff, saw the futility of war, was holding this secret that to us, oh, you didn't kill all your men. Wow. But to the Klingons, that made him the worst war criminal of all. And the Federation are the people who, no, we're the ones who did the war crimes. Turning our expectation on its head, giving us that feel of the trauma of war, because there are no good guys, there are no bad guys. It's all horror. Just an excellent episode. And while I think the second episode of this season was the best Star Trek episode of all the new Trek, this is close. But in a way, it was the least Star Trek of the Star Trek episodes. Then
Subspace Rhapsody. Boy, there are two groups. You either love this or you hate it. You either are crying at the top of your soapbox, this isn't Star Trek, everything's terrible, it's an alternate timeline, or you're going, oh, that was damn fun. I enjoyed it. What do you think, Cory?
First off, stuff that you probably didn't know. The band Letters to Cleo, they're the ones who wrote all the songs.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Johnson, a PW Insider, that's his favorite band in the whole world. He's not a big Star Trek guy, but he had to watch it because of that. Second, they said that they took all the inspiration from the Buffy episode. And that Buffy episode, yes. I don't know if you were watching it at that time, there was all this emotional stuff that had been going on all season. The musical episode was where you got the explosion. All the emotional stuff that had been building. Buffy's secret was that when they brought her back from the dead, they pulled her out of heaven. And she resented them for it. And there were interpersonal relationships and other things going on. And it all exploded in that. Same for this. You've had all this emotional stuff that's been going on all season. It all explodes here.
Yeah. There's a lot that goes on.
Which made it more entertaining, because in a musical, when words no longer work is when you sing. And the concluding song could have been the cheesiest goddamn thing ever, but because everybody went full into it, it worked. Even the K-pop. That's right.
Yeah, go look it up. Klingons, K-pop.
Klingons don't do opera. They do Korean pop.
There's a couple of things I want to mention. You go to those old scientists, one of the storylines, how it got advanced, is when Boimler goes back in time and he's really disturbed that Spock's trying to show emotion. And he accidentally tells Chapel that this isn't the Spock I know. The Spock I know is logical, does not show emotion, which kind of hurts Chapel because she realizes Spock's doing this for her, but it's not the way he's going to end up. So again, advances the storyline. Subspace Rhapsody, a lot of things happen. Pike expresses his love for Bartell, and fortunately, he gets cut off before he embarrasses himself too badly on the bridge. The scientific explanation as to what happens is that they discover this subspace fold. They send, Uhura decides to broadcast anything goes through it in order to, we're not getting anywhere with voice, maybe music. All of a sudden, boom, an improbability field goes out and everybody begins singing about their feelings. They discover, again, Pike in an argument with Patel in front of the crew starts singing. Chapel wins a prestigious research fellowship with someone who we know later she becomes engaged to. That seems a bit salty. And she reveals in a song that she prioritizes it over Spock, much to, I mean, you can, Sean Farrick on Trek Culture talks about one of the things you got to be able to do is to show a cry face without crying. Ethan Peck, he does that. I believe there's somebody else who does the same thing. Might be Lan, because she goes and confesses her feeling to Kirk before the musical can force her to. Because when you're doing a musical, you can't control yourself. Kirk reveals he's already in a relationship with Carol Marcus, who's pregnant with her kid, or his kid. Whoa, there's a little continuity we never knew about. I wonder if we'll see Gary Mitchell soon. Anyways, Uhura determines that singing an upbeat grand finale will provide enough energy to close the improbability field before the Klingons arrive to blow it up. And when the song concludes, the improbability field dissipates. I love the science fiction explanation for it. I didn't need it. The music was great. They worked on their, you could tell who had musical chops and who didn't. And of course, I miss the best joke on the entire thing because I never watched Buffy. It's when Luann goes, so what's next? More improbability? Or will we just suddenly poof into bunnies? And then Migo goes, I would prefer not to be a bunny either. I'd have somebody explain that to me. Very polarizing episode. Again, they took a chance. I enjoyed it. What do you think, Cory?
It shows me that people take things way too seriously.
Yeah.
And to me, this set up the Spock Chapel dynamic in the original series. Chapel realizes she made a mistake not by not being with Spock. Spock, he's the dumped boyfriend, so yeah, screw you.
All the music is online too if you want to check it out, because it's I know my buddy Mike Rittenhouse, who does a group called The Final Frontier, where they take the original series episodes and do songs about them. He's probably thumping himself on the head going, you're taking my stick. So anyways, check him out.
Then we get our season finale.
Yep. How do you say it? Homogeny?
Homogeny.
Bartel's ship, the USS Cayuga, is ambushed by the Gorn while resupplying the human colony. Forget it. Who cares what the name is? Chapel is aboard the Cayuga en route to her fellowship, survives the attack. The Enterprise arrives to find the wreckage of the Cayuga and a Gorn device jamming communications and transporters. Admiral April orders Pike not to cross the Gorn claimed space, but Pike secretly leads Ortega, Leanne, Mbega, and Sam Kirk to the surface. There they find Bertel and other survivors, including, you want to tell them, Cory?
Montgomery Scott.
Played by a real Scottishman, by the way. So the accent is authentic. Scott, of course, is as brilliant as you think. He builds a cloaking device to hide from the Gorn, which is how they were able to survive. Pike learns that Batel has been infected with Gorn eggs. Following a strategy suggested by Uhura and Pelia, Spock installs rockets on the Cayuga wreckage so they can crash it into the jammer. He kills an attacking Gorn with the help of Chapel. The jammer is destroyed. The Enterprise beams up Pike, Scott, and Batel, who are taken straight to medical. Everybody else beams up. Unfortunately, they discover the Gorn beamed them up. And the Enterprise is now being attacked by Gorn hunter ships with a Gorn battleship waiting on their side of the line. And Pike is left. What's he going to do? Follow orders, retreat, stay and rescue his captured crew, his fight. I loved seeing Scott. Absolutely brilliant. If you've ever seen Aliens, or was it Alien 3? Alien 3, whatever. You knew something was up as soon as the Gorn didn't attack Bartel, just kind of sniffed her and ran away. And I was like, oh, if you kill her, we're going to riot.
Aliens. That's Aliens.
Aliens.
They
Okay.
did that a number of times in that.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought it was Aliens 3.
They had it in there too, but they took it from the second one.
So this, I've actually enjoyed. Well, I'm going to talk about some of the weird things with it, but I want to hear what you thought of this, other than the cliffhanger.
Again, it was a Star Trek episode. You had a problem, they solved it with science. It was also they had dropped things that built up to this cliffhanger and this story, rather than, well, okay, we got 10 minutes left. How can we figure out how to drag this out? Everybody did their part. This was very much this was the action adventure Star Trek. This was the, okay, here's our problem. Let's science the hell out of it.
Oh. And it was creepy because we knew what the Gorn were now. When we first ran into them last season, we had no idea how creepy alien they were.
Yes, they've done a really good job of making the Gorn not just creepy and alien, but interesting.
And this is the first time we see what could be an adult Gorn.
Yes.
Because he's in a space chute. He's trying to sabotage what's left of the Cayuga's hull. I know, and here's where I want to get into some of the controversy going on. So people are losing their shit over this isn't the Gorn we knew. And I'm a headcanon guy. I look at it like, we don't know a lot about the Gorn that Kirk ran into. He could be like an elder Gorn, which is why he stands upright and doesn't have a tail. Obviously, the race that picked him and Kirk chose him because he was representative of the race, so they got to fight it out on the planet. That's not saying that the Gorn we see aren't... There's too much about the Gorn we don't know. How do they go from a... what do you call it? Parasitic birth to eating each other, to being wild, to being able to handle a spacefaring society? We don't know. We're going to find out, I hope. Doesn't bother me. It's to be revealed. I know people are like, well, I thought Kirk didn't know who the Gorn were. So, not really. They didn't know who was attacking it. And they may not have ever seen the Gorn like this before. Again, I've read all the extended universe stuff where they explain different classes of Gorn. And the one that we saw in the original series, those were the shock troops. They were tough, they were rough, they were slow, they were methodical. A lot of people are upset because Pike seems indecisive. He's not a decisive captain. It's like, yeah, he had like 10 seconds before to be continued. The other thing that I will say, and I'll toss it back to you, Cory. Hey, the Gorn fought first. They're on our side of the line. Why Starfleet? They constantly let the bad guys, Romulan, Klingons, whatever, come into Federation space, whereas if we go into Romulan space or we go into Klingon space, it's an act of war. Hey, they're on our side. It's war, baby. Again, I don't know what Pike's going to do. If I had to... I want to end this by how you would resolve it, but Cory, what do you think on the episode or anything I've been blabbing about?
I think the episode is well done. I think the people are complaining that the Gorn are different.
Oh, no, they complain about the Borg during Picard. Don't worry about that.
When they complain about the Gorn being different, he was in a 20. I've said it before. With the original Star Trek, they had $20. Go get a lizard suit out of props.
Well, he blinks in the episodes where they updated all the CGI.
Yeah.
What else do you want? You got a blinking Gorn.
If you're complaining about that, then you should be complaining about the fact that the computers were basically light brights in the original series, and they're actual computers now.
The whole set is bright.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mean the old toy, the light bright. Where you would take the little plastic things and poke them through the black paper.
Poop, poop, poop. We used to use those as spotlights when we did our make-believe shows as kids. One thing that really bothered me most of all, and this was more in Subspace Veracity, there's nobody in engineering. The only time people are in engineering is when we need to see Carolyn Kane's character or we need 3 people to sing. We always saw people in engineering in Deep Space Nine. We saw it in Voyager. We saw it everywhere else. This is the most sparsely populated crew Enterprise I've ever seen. Yeah, we got the hallways, and occasionally we see other crew members, especially when they're dancing or singing or, whatever, or dying from Gorn. That was the other thing. Engineering doesn't feel like engineering. It says, yeah, this is a very bright set, and this is going to be engineering. Now 50 years from now, they say, Cory, we want you to pick up this show and write it. How would you start it?
I would, in the intervening time, how does Star Trek solve their problems with science? So Anson Mount figures out a way that they can pull back but not run away. Because, it's like there are 1,000 ships coming at you. You want to save these people, but you're not going to be able to if your shields fail and you get blown up.
And
so,
needless to say, remember, Scott and Pele are running to engineering with the cloaking device to hide from the Gorn that Scott made on the planet. So You got that Easter egg out there.
So you got that out there, just like in Star Trek 2. You've had your initial clash. Both parties pull back. You find out that the Gorn that have the humans is taking off. They use the cloaking thing to go after them and figure out a science way to save everybody. That way, Pike can say, hey, we disengaged just like you told us to. But you went and blah, blah, blah. You didn't say we couldn't do that. Now, let's remember, though, when Best of Both Worlds, my way for defeating the Borg were, they're a big computer, right? Use the subspace array to magnetize the ship, start whipping around the Borg cube. The magnet would erase their hard drive, save the people, and leave. No. So just because it could work scientifically doesn't mean it's what they're going to do.
See, for me writing this, Pike blows the hunters out of the sky. Why? They're on their side of the border. Again, I really hate Starfleet's don't fire first. They've been fired upon. You can defend yourself. Again, he's going to have to argue with April about, why didn't you just retreat? I would have everything I have loaded at the Gorn ship, but not fired. I think Bartell has something in her, aka a queen alien. Because from what we've seen of the Gorn, they basically rip each other to shreds when they're younger. Again, these might have been adolescent Gorns because they weren't necessarily eating each other. Although when they did kill the one, the other ones went to feed on it. That's why I'm thinking the Gorn didn't kill her. Because he kills everything else he sees. Hey, you're my sibling, I got to kill you. There's something special about this one. I think the Gorn will negotiate to have Bartell come over and give birth to whatever special Gorn they need in order to and this will start some type of relationship, understanding, detente between the Gorn and the Enterprise, the Federation. Again, I got to give some tragedy in there because, first of all, I want to see the Enterprise do something. They didn't do that in the last James movie. They should have had the Enterprise at least shoot once at the USS Vengeance, which caused it to crash on the planet. The original Enterprise in the original series was as much of a character as anybody else, which is why it was so shocking when it got destroyed in Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. This Enterprise is pretty, I get goosebumps when I see it, but it is not an episode. Give me that same scene in the beginning where the Enterprise raises its hull and every weapon is trained to blow that Gorn ship, battleship, survivors or not, out of the water. You have to figure out a detente right away, so they're not firing at each other. And like you said, Cory, they can't retreat because science. Maybe that's what will happen is the ship will disappear and suddenly the Gorn don't know where to fight. But I do want to see the Enterprise kick some fucking ass. That's me. Thank you for indulging me in watching this, even though we know we're not going to see anything new, if ever.
And we've been talking for an hour and 45 minutes.
Oh, good grief. Well, good, because I didn't have a retro review ready anyways. But you know what? We do have what we're always ready for. These guys are sponsors.
Our newest sponsor is NordVPN. Let's be honest, if you're out on the internet, you need a VPN to protect you. There's all sorts of things going on the internet where people can track you. You could accidentally download a keylogger, all sorts of things. NordVPN gives the best security possible. It has a password manager which generates complex passwords, syncs across all your devices, stores your notes and credit card information. It also gives you 10 gigabytes of private cloud storage, secure files. It backs up your data automatically. But the main thing it gives you is peace of mind. It gives you peace of mind when you're out on the internet, when you're streaming, when you're playing games, when you're listening to podcasts like this one. It gives you safety anywhere at any time. It protects your online activity. You get full access to all content. And if you use the link go.nordvpn.net sh3ku, it'll take you to where you can get a great deal for a 1-month plan, a 2-year plan, a 1-year plan. They are our newest sponsor. We're happy to have them. And if you would like to sponsor something here at any of the podcasts on the Solitaire Rose Network, you can. Just email me, solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com. Thanks.
And we only have time for one freaking and one geeking. So, Joe, what are you freaking on?
Oh, my buddy Turbo, I have to say goodbye to him. He's heading back to Florida, which is kind of sad. We'll be able to talk here and there. So, little sad about that, but that's okay. Cory, what you freaking on?
We found out earlier today, this will be coming out days after. Yesterday, Terry Funk passed away, longtime wrestler, 79 years old, reinvented himself every few years. He was a classic wrestler, and then he was the crazy Texan, and then he became the middle-aged crazy who was doing, the moonsaults in his 50s and doing barbed wire matches in his 40s and 50s, and so beloved by everyone in the business and many fans. Butch said that the greatest moment of his life was when Terry Funk screamed and insulted him.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking like inches from Butch's face. When you look at the picture, Butch looks like he's just delirious and scared at the same time.
Yeah. He had been in a nursing facility for the past few years. His friend said that once his wife passed away in, I think, 2018, he just kind of wasn't with it anymore. But while he was at that nursing facility, he always had visitors of people who'd worked with him. Mick Foley, there are tons of pictures of him and Mick Foley together over the last few years. He did not go alone. He did not go broke. He went very peacefully with knowing how much he was loved. And I think that's the most important thing, is when you go, knowing how much people care about you.
I will also mention, because I don't know, you might be getting into it. Longtime comic book illustrator Dan Green passed away August 19th at the age of 70. Born in Detroit, had a lengthy career as an inker, worked on long runs on Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Uncanny X-Men, Wolverine, Hulk for Marvel, Justice League for DC. Provided watercolor illustrations for the graphic novel Doctor Strange into
Shambhala.
Thank you.
Which is beautiful.
He did painted covers for.
Book.
Oh yeah, did painted covers for Amazing High Adventures, an issue for Gargoyles for Marvels. A lot of people online talking about how great he was. So, and of course, I looked in my collection, and I'm happy because I do have a copy of X-Men 308 that he autographed.
And then right before we went on the air, WWE announced that Bray Wyatt, Barry Windham's son, passed away.
Holy.
Yeah. And he had been in a match earlier this year, and people kept asking, well, when is he coming back? And WWE would say he has a life-threatening illness. His death has surprised everybody because he was so 36. He was one of the most inventive minds in wrestling. He always was doing something different. He always had his finger on a different pulse than everybody else. We'll probably find out more in the months ahead, but Bray Wyatt was one of those guys who, when WWE let him off the leash, he got a reaction. One of my favorite stories Nick ever told was when you had the Wyatt family versus the Shield. And they were finally going to meet at a pay-per-view in Minneapolis, and Nick was so excited about it, he splurged and bought front row tickets. And he said, when they were coming to the ring, the crowd was chanting, "This is awesome." He said he'd never felt that much electricity for anything before the fight started. He said he could not believe how excited people were for it. Yeah, just not a good week for pro wrestling. No. Terry Funk is someone you expected to pass away. Bray Wyatt was very much out of the blue. And there were a lot of wrestlers who knew him are posting some beautiful pictures of him behind the scenes and stories about just how much fun he was to be around and how generous he was with ideas. So, Joe, let's turn this around. What are you geeking on?
Oh, I got to do some serious geeking. I was going with the MCBA dropping off flyers for their show coming up October 28th. Y'all know I'm going to it with my old buddy Pat. I've been finding oodles of amazing stuff to bring to the show. Not only that, but I'm going to have lots of stuff from our old pal Mike Edmondson, who passed away. And if you want to get a piece for your personal collection, you know where to go. Come out there and check it out. Meanwhile, there was a Comic-Con on Sunday. I didn't officially go to it because I was sick. Actually, it was on Saturday. This is the EAKK, or as I call it, Kelly's show. And I went and hung for a bit. I found some really cool stuff. I found a copy of Carlton's all-new Emergency #1, which in really nice shape and for a decent price. The steal of the show, I found a copy of WCW World Championship Wrestling Magazine #10 for $10. This sucker's like those last 3 issues are like $80 to $100 on the eBays, if you can find them. So I was really happy with that. I did go through my collection. I do have some spare WCW books. So if you're out there and you're interested, you know what to do. Just contact me through the emails, through my eBay, through my Facebook. I'll let you know what I got. We can do a deal. And of course, Cory, what do I always buy when I'm at a show?
Deathmate?
No, but I did find some in my collection. I didn't throw up. No, signed comics. I got a signature series of Magnus. I think it's John Ostrander, and I'm not sure who else did it because on the back it just has the Valiant Validated Signature Series. So I'm going to have to go look up and see who did that. I picked up a copy of Ursa Minor #4. It was a New Orleans Comic-Con exclusive that was signed by Jen Partel. And then I got a Lady Death versus Purgatory Ace Edition signed by Steve Hughes and Jim Ballant. Steve Hughes, of course, was a long-term artist, passed away. Jim Ballant, of course, did the big-boobed Catwoman and does Cory's favorite, well, not favorite comic, but has his favorite panel of any comic book in it, from Tarot, Tales of the White Witch, Witchblade, whatever.
Black Rose, Tales of the Black Rose.
And the last thing I got is a signed Batgirl #1, signed by Robert Campanella. And Cory, why is Batgirl #1 so considered a key issue?
Which Batgirl #1?
Well, I thought when you heard it was Campanella, you would have figured it out.
Isn't that the one where she's magically cured from being in a wheelchair?
No, it actually happened in 2000. This was the mute Cassandra King.
Oh, okay,
Batgirl.
One of the other Batgirls.
Yeah, one of the other Batgirls. There's been so damn many. So I was happy with that. Spent a lot of money, spent some time. A lot of the guys were spending money. I don't think the con was as busy as people expected. It's been hot here in the Twin Cities. I mean, oppressive hot, dangerous hot. And it's finally starting to drop, where today is just hot, not I walked into a vat of boiling Jello hot like it was yesterday. So things are getting better. And now I gotta, oh, by the way, I'm selling stuff on eBay. I need to get some money up for the next con happening September 23rd. So if you at all care about my signed comic book collection, you would go buy something off the eBay shop, which of course I have all sorts of cool things there anyways. Cory, what you geeking on?
I actually sat down and read a whole bunch of the horror reprints that I have now now have them all in a box. And one of them was not actually a reprint. Creatures on the Loose. I think I talked about this a little with let me double check here. With issue 16, started putting a new story in, Gulliver Jones, Warrior of Mars. And before you think, well, that sounds like a ripoff of John Carter, Warlord of Mars. No, Gulliver Jones came first. It was
Don't you feel foolish?
It's another one of those where Roy Thomas dug up something old, did hey, can we do an adaptation of this? And the family said, okay. The first issues were drawn by Gil Kane. Then you had an issue half drawn by Ross Andrew and the other half by, oh my gosh, who drew the other half? Because they switched artists in the middle of the story. And you could see that Ross Andrew had only drawn parts of some pages. Sam Granger. And then after that, Gray Morrow took over. Very much a Marvel 70s thing where, okay, the first few were written by Roy Thomas. Then the next couple are written by Gary Conway. And then Gary Conway and George Effinger, who was the science fiction writer, George Effinger finished up the series. It started by Gil Kane, then Ross Andrew, then Sam Granger. But it's a fun story that, boy, when you read it, it's like, it's really clear to me that William Burroughs, the guy who created Tarzan, read this book and went, I could do that. They do update it for modern times. So rather than the guy being a soldier from the Spanish-American War, he's from the Vietnam War. And then he is taken to Mars by a magician, basically. But it's just fun in that you've got this story that takes up about the first half of the book. Then you have monster reprints in the back. Kirby, Ditko, you get some Jack Keller, you get some Don Heck. And I imagine if this was 1972,
If I was buying comics back then and was old enough that monsters didn't freak me out, I would have been all over this, because once monsters no longer freaked me out, I loved the reprints because it's, ooh, Jack Kirby, ooh, Steve Ditko, ooh, Gene Colan. But I've just been enjoying it, just been enjoying reading it. It's that 70s overwritten, gotta have a fight scene every 3 pages, Marvel craziness of the 70s where it's being passed off around the office. In the one that's by Ross Andru and Sam Granger, you could actually tell that Ross Andru, what he liked drawing, because the monsters and the girls are all drawn by Ross Andru, and everything else is drawn by Sam Granger. And you can tell if you can tell art. And it's fun for me, first off, because the story is goofy and weird and silly, but also because it's like, well, yeah, I can tell what Ross Andru liked to draw, and that he was just drawing this stuff, and they said, hey, you're behind on your deadline. And he handed the pages over to Sam Granger and said, yeah, you take care of the rest. Believe it or not, kids, you've listened to us blather on about Star Trek for almost 2 hours.
We won't do it next week. We'll talk about comic books.
Why, yes, we will. And as we say every week, the comic we like the least, we still like better than the comic that you like the most. Joe?
What do you think about a Lego Star Trek? You know why Star Trek was so successful, right, Cory?
And why is that?
It had good genes. Time to beam me up, Scotty. My work here is done.